I did want to do something a little different with this level. I wanted it to be more open world feel, and that there was something blocking your progress, so it did encourage people to look closely and see how to unlock this blocked way. And I do like just walking around this level and listening to the beautiful music by Josh Kramer. His work really sets the mood for the whole game. My dad built a lot of stuff in his free time. If he wasn't watching fly fishing or reading Tom Clancy novels, he was carving something. He made tons of birdhouses. Not that he was into bird watching, but I think he really missed working and adding on to the home. If he couldn't afford the time to build onto our own house, he would have to settle with watching birds move into their little homes. We kept an old mattress in the bed of that ugly yellow truck, so we would drive it deep into the woods and then watch the birds fly into their houses while the sun set. Usually it was accompanied by venison jerky or a cold Coke, but not a lot of talking, which is how we both liked it. Earlier I said I just love going through video games and exploring, like looking at every nook and cranny and just trying to find little details. And I think that started because in middle school and high school, I would make mods for my favorite games, namely Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and Far Cry. And I loved like this huge world of mod makers who would make these levels, and it'd be like the most random creative things, and I would just love exploring, usually multiplayer levels by myself. So even though I went to college for film, before that, like before high school, I was making video games and mods, and it was my favorite thing in the world. I made a ton of different levels. I made an abandoned space hotel with a dance floor and cafeteria. I made a haunted campground with cabins and tents. I made this whole city with like the first ever day-night cycle with running showers and stuff in the hotel and the apartment buildings. And I just loved making those mods, and I think that carries over to my game, The First Tree, and also the one before that, Home is Where One Starts, which is it's exploration. You're just looking around and appreciating the details. We were happiest underneath the evergreens. We decided it was time to finally map out the hundreds of acres we lived on just to pass the time during the summer. He was only free in the evenings, so I would spend the day wasting time on dial-up internet and sketching, and then we would rush into the woods, pen and map in hand, before evening fell. Sometimes, the aurora borealis would cast a cold green glow on the mountainside, and we would finish our route underneath a twilight sky. Sometimes I was lonely during those summer days, but there was comfort in the routine.
A lot of teenagers aren't looking for the daily grind, though. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get out, to leave your childhood home. You wanted to progress, to make something of yourself.
Yeah, you're right. That house. I'm sure it's the same as how I left it. But then why does it feel so different?
I doubt you're the only adult to have looked back and asked that question.
almost all stories follow the same kind of structure. And it starts with an inciting event, and then there's rising action, and then there's a climax, and then there's falling action. And it's actually really difficult to make an interesting story where you only hear these two people talking, and it's spoken through a dream that's already happened. And the most of the action is about this animal that isn't directly related to this couple at all. So I don't know what I was thinking, but my hope was that it would create some interesting things and connections that I didn't see before. And that was kind of the whole exercise of making the first tree. our property, there were old abandoned pieces of a shed and car long left unused. I used to ask him all the time who those people were that left all this junk, and I'm sure he got so tired of hearing it that he made up some elaborate stories how a brown bear ate them and haunted the woods afterwards. What's funny is I think it made those people seem more real. Growing up thinking they were still hanging out like they couldn't say goodbye. I used to tell my friends how I could swear I saw spirits move near the water, and that always freaked them out. I guess it didn't bother me, because the way I saw it, they were normal people with old cars and sheds, just trying to figure out how to survive and be happy in the middle of nowhere. It was a cool thought that they didn't want to leave, but I was a weird kid.
Well, you had good company since those ghosts like living in a place where they were brutally devoured.
I don't think The First Tree could work at all without the music by Josh Kramer. And his music, it's actually publicly available to license, and so it was affordable for me since this was a hobby project. And it's something I like to tell new indie developers all the time, like, you can't afford that composer, you can't afford a full-time programmer. You need to cut corners and finish your game, and the way to do that is to use these amazing publicly available assets that anyone can purchase and license. And so his music it's incredible, and I actually haven't talked to him that much, I've just emailed him. But his music was nominated for Most Emotional Music at the Emotional Game Awards in France, and he's just a really nice guy. And I think there's so much amazing content out there that if you're thinking of making a game, like, look around and see what you can make work on a tight budget, because it worked really well for The First Tree. Even at my most distant, at the times when I detested him the most, he kept reaching out. For a year straight, he asked me every week when we were going camping. I thought he was just dense. Eventually, to shut him up, I agreed. We carried out the worn lawn chairs from the garage and set up a cinder block campfire at the site we'd always used behind the house. We walked down the mountain path, talking in the warm sunshine we only got a couple months of the year. Those 3 obsidian rocks shimmered alongside the shore, almost like sparklers pressed against a dark window. I'll never forget that wet stone on my feet, or how those massive mountains looked even bigger in the lake's reflection. I felt small, but grateful. As the sun set, my dad found something I hadn't seen for a long time. The tree where I'd made my first carving when I was 6. I hadn't even carved it. My dad had helped me, but I still called it my tree. Something about seeing my name there made me open up, and we talked about everything that night in that old camouflage tent. I told him how much I loved sketching and design, and how it would be a dream to study architecture in Seattle. I told him how I didn't get along with my friends much anymore, but that I didn't mind being alone. He told me he was there for me, and he joked that if all he had to do was write my name on a tree to finally get me to talk, he would have left me carved logs with novels on them in front of my room every morning. I don't know why it took me that long to realize it, but it was then I knew how much he had sacrificed for me. The perpetrator stood nearby, unfazed, like nothing was wrong. My dad is dead, and he's never coming back, Rachel. I can tell you these stories, but I can never reminisce with him again. He can never hold a grandchild that we'll probably never be able to have. I can never talk to him again, and I'll never be able to say I'm sorry for everything. It was really important to me that the wolf in this story that takes the fox's cubs, that it wasn't explained at all. Like, it's just this entity that's in the background. And of course, it's supposed to represent something bigger than a wolf or even the fox. It's supposed to represent like the specter of death. And it comes when you least expect it. There's no justification. He's just there, always watching. I need to go to bed. I just can't talk about this anymore. Good night.